My next interview is with David Ploss of the Standard Byte. Sure. What is the Standard Byte?
The Standard Byte either is or was. I mean, it was the tagline for it was always a mouthful of interesting from around the web. It was a live call-in show where we did sort of a news commentary where we pulled stories, got together for a sort of a production meeting, chose what interesting, cool, weird stories from all kinds of topics from around the web were going to make it that day, and then we discussed them. If we had them, we would field calls from the live listening audience, too. We never knew what was going to happen or who was going to say what. We were riding that cough button quite a few times based on the topic. And then occasionally, every other week or so, I would do a longer scripted diatribe on a topic of my choice, particularly bothering me at that time. My idea was to give a voice to individuals in this community who weren't the sort of right-leaning Republican red state type things that most people associate Indiana with, let alone Fort Wayne. So I'm quite liberal. I worked for Bernie Sanders' campaign here in Indiana when he was campaigning here. Mm-hmm. So I felt that particular voice was underrepresented, or the topics of the world that spoke to that particular group were underrepresented, and wanted to try my hand at delivering that message or those topics in a fun, entertaining way with my sort of deadpan style of humor and an eclectic group of friends from which to bounce ideas off of, and it led to quite an artistic flavor.
Did it evolve from what you initially thought?
It did. The Standard Byte ended up being the culmination of a process that started in my living room in a house that I was renting with some very cheap microphones, a laptop, and nary an idea of what I was going to talk about. I knew I loved books. I knew I loved pop culture, current events, and comedy. So why not talk about those things in a podcast that I started back there in the living room? Was called the Working Reader Podcast with David Ploss. Okay. It was a little ego-driven by putting with David Ploss. But we talked about books. We did book reviews because I had done that in the past. I had made money as a book critic in the past. Books, pop culture. We talked about celebrities and all kinds of things that were going on. Current events. Comedy, because I love comedy, stand-up comedy, comedians. I love delivering comedy whenever I can. So we took that podcast. I ran that podcast for a year. I said, well, let's try to get 5,000 downloads a month. If 5,000 people are listening to our show, which I put out on a weekly basis, at least once a month, then to me that's a success.
And so that transferred over to WELT?
It sure did. The Working Reader Podcast, at exactly 1 year, hit 5,000 downloads a month, which isn't very popular in the grand scheme of podcasts, but it was popular enough for me to serve my purposes. And then, God rest his soul, Eric Molberg came to me. Somebody came to me and put me in touch with him. Mm-hmm. He said, I'm starting a radio station in the library. Mm-hmm. I said, I didn't even know there was a radio station in the library. Mm-hmm. He goes, there wasn't a little while ago. Mm-hmm. And so he said, I said, well, I've been doing this podcast and I'd like to take it a little bit further. And he said, well, I think we can accommodate that. What is it that you wanted to talk about? What was your show about? So I explained it to him. He said, right. That's perfect.
Who's your target audience?
Our target audience was that sort of 18 to 34 demographic, mm-hmm. or anybody on the gray areas of those ends that maybe was questioning a lot of things and was looking for a new perspective in the world and topics at hand. So yeah, it bled over, and I hope we helped answer questions for people or help them, I don't know, kind of decide where they wanted to be.
So emotions move people. Have you considered, or did you consider, what emotion you wanted to ignite or catch fire?
Well, I know you are correct in that emotions move people, but I didn't want anything that I said to be fake, because the most important thing to me in my life is truth, is the real, unabashed truth. If I thought something was funny, I told people it was funny. If I thought something was messed up, I told them it was messed up. If I knew something to be a lie, I told people to watch out for it. I told them to confront anyone who tells them otherwise. I like to foment critical thinking and skepticism. Because if we don't question things, then we don't progress. And so the critical thinking and skepticism, in my opinion, positive claims require positive evidence. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And that which can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. I knew that I needed to be a part of this to help get it off the ground. And if I got to experiment a little in the meantime, that was a bonus. Just to be around these people, and that person in particular, was a blessing for a guy who doesn't necessarily believe in blessing. I will be going to school soon, going back to school for broadcast journalism or something in that vein, because I'd like to be radio, television. I'm 7 feet tall. I'm a gorgeous man. There's no way I shouldn't be in front of a camera. Am I right? And a little bit of pride goes a long way. So,
not shy at all.
No, not at all. I can't afford to be. This giant and shy? No. That'd be embarrassing.
I need to go ahead to this final question.
Sure.
What does community radio mean to you? Or what did community does?
It still does. I will never feel differently.
That's
community radio means an opportunity for people of marginalized voices to come together and speak. And that means it's radio by, of, and for the people. And no matter your voice, so long as it's intelligent, I think, is the real crux of it. You have a place. You have a home. You have the ability to say what you want to say. And that is so important, especially in today's world of, believe me. I can't really put it any more succinctly than that. In a world of believe me's, community radio provides an outlet for discovery.
This is David Ploss from the Standard Byte. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.